Tactics and Treachery, Decoding Russia's Hybrid Assault on Ukraine. In the years leading up to its 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Russia engaged in a series of intricate and covert operations designed to undermine Ukrainian sovereignty and extend its own geopolitical influence. This report delves into the multifaceted nature of these activities, shedding light on the Kremlin's strategic use of historical narratives, intelligence operations, cyber warfare, military intimidation, and political as well as economic manipulation. The annexation of Crimea and the orchestrated unrest in eastern Ukraine stand as stark manifestations of Russia's broader campaign to destabilize its neighbor. As we analyze these events, it becomes apparent that they are not isolated incidents, but rather part of a concerted effort by Russia to exploit vulnerabilities and assert its dominance in the post-Soviet space. The tactics employed by the Kremlin, ranging from the deployment of unmarked military personnel, dubbed Little Green Men, to sophisticated cyberattacks on critical infrastructure, reveal a complex strategy aimed at achieving strategic goals without crossing the threshold into open conflict. This report aims not only to unpack the intricacies of Russia's actions, but also to highlight the lessons and warnings they hold for other nations. The Ukrainian experience underscores the necessity of vigilance, robust cyber defenses, and a unified international response to such hybrid threats. As nations navigate the murky waters of modern geopolitical conflicts, the case of Ukraine serves as a crucial learning curve, emphasizing the need to anticipate and counteract similar strategies that could be employed elsewhere. Through this analysis, we aim to contribute to a deeper understanding of modern statecraft and hybrid warfare, offering insights that can inform both policy and security measures to safeguard national sovereignty and regional stability in an increasingly complex international arena. Executive summary. This report provides an analysis of Russia's multifaceted approach to infiltrate and destabilize Ukraine leading up to the 2022 invasion. The Kremlin employed a combination of historical manipulation, intelligence operations, cyber activities, military posturing, and political economic influence to undermine Ukrainian sovereignty and enhance Russia's strategic position in the region. Notable tactics included propaganda efforts, cyber operations targeting critical infrastructure, the annexation of Crimea, false flag operations, and the exploitation of legal and illegal immigration pathways to insert operatives and sympathizers. The effectiveness of these strategies was varied, with significant implications for regional stability and international security. Historical context and relations. Following the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, Ukraine declared its independence, marking a significant turning point in its relations with Russia. This transition raised complex issues regarding sovereignty, particularly due to the intertwined histories and populations of the two nations. A key point of contention arose around Ukraine's relinquishment of its substantial nuclear arsenal, the third largest at the time, under the Budapest Memorandum, in exchange for security assurances. The post-Soviet era also saw recurring disputes over natural gas supplies, with Ukraine's strategic role as a conduit for Russian gas to Europe, leading to several crises that underscored the region's energy security vulnerabilities. The status of the Russian Black Sea Fleet in Crimea, based in Sevastopol, further complicated bilateral relations. Negotiations resulted in agreements permitting Russia to lease the base until 2042, a factor that played a critical role in the lead-up to the annexation of Crimea. Ukraine's gradual pivot towards Western institutions, seeking closer ties with the European Union and NATO, was met with resistance from Russia, which perceived such a shift as a threat to its influence. This tension culminated in significant political upheavals, notably the 2004 Orange Revolution and the 2013-2014 Euromaidan protests, which led to the ousting of pro-Russian President Viktor Yanukovych. The annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014, following a military intervention and a controversial referendum, escalated tensions significantly. This act, condemned by the international community, and in violation of principles of state sovereignty and territorial integrity, led to widespread sanctions against Russia. The strategic and historical claims Russia made to justify the annexation and the subsequent conflict in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk and Luhansk regions have not only strained Russia-Ukraine relations, but also heightened tensions between Russia and the West, necessitating a re-evaluation of regional and global security policies. This backdrop of intertwined historical, political, and security issues underscores the complexity of the relationship between Russia and Ukraine and the challenges in addressing the ongoing conflict and ensuring regional stability. Intelligence operations and cyber activities. Russia's use of cyber capabilities against Ukraine represents a significant dimension of modern hybrid warfare, where digital attacks are used to complement traditional military operations and political strategies. These cyber operations have targeted various sectors, including government, energy, and media, aiming to disrupt Ukraine's critical infrastructure and undermine its state functions, while also attempting to gather strategic intelligence that could be leveraged for future operations. One notable case study that exemplifies Russia's cyber tactics against Ukraine is the 2015 attack on the Ukrainian power grid. In December 2015, hackers launched a coordinated cyber attack on 3 Ukrainian power distribution companies, causing widespread power outages and affecting tens of thousands of customers. This incident marked the first known successful cyber attack on a power grid, demonstrating the potential of cyber operations to cause tangible, real-world disruptions. The attack was sophisticated and multi-staged, beginning with a phishing campaign to gain access to the networks of the power companies. Once inside, the attackers conducted extensive reconnaissance to understand the network's operations and identify key systems. The attackers then deployed custom malware known as Black Energy 3 to disable systems and erase critical files, which hindered recovery efforts. They also interfered with backup power supplies and inundated call centers with fake calls to delay reporting and response to the outage. The Ukrainian response to the 2015 power grid attack and subsequent cyber incidents highlights the country's resilience and adaptive cyber defenses. Ukraine has since strengthened its cyber infrastructure, implemented more robust security protocols, and enhanced collaboration with international partners to share threat intelligence and best practices. These measures have contributed to the limited impact of subsequent cyber operations on Ukraine's military networks and critical infrastructure, despite the ongoing threats. This case study underscores the strategic use of cyber operations as a tool of statecraft and warfare, aiming not only to inflict immediate disruptions, but also to test adversary defenses, signal capabilities, and erode confidence in the state's ability to provide essential services. The evolving nature of cyber threats and the continuous adaptation by both attackers and defenders highlight the importance of robust cyber defenses, international cooperation, and the development of resilient infrastructure to mitigate the impacts of such operations. Military movements and exercises. In the lead-up to the full-scale invasion, Russia's strategic military maneuvers along the Ukrainian border served multiple objectives, including intimidation, strategic deception, and operational preparation. These activities were characterized by the massing of troops, the deployment of advanced military hardware, and the conduct of large-scale military exercises that signaled a significant escalation of tensions in the region. Troop buildup. The Russian military amassed a considerable force along the Ukrainian border, involving tens of thousands of troops. This buildup included not just infantry units, but also armored divisions, artillery units, and specialized combat support elements, indicating a readiness for a broad range of military operations. The scale and composition of these forces suggested capabilities beyond mere border security or training exercises, pointing instead towards preparations for offensive operations. Advanced military hardware. The deployment included advanced systems such as state-of-the-art tanks, missile systems, electronic warfare units, and air defense systems. The presence of such sophisticated equipment underscored the seriousness of the Russian posture and its potential for rapid escalation into conflict. This hardware provided Russia with a variety of offensive and defensive capabilities, enhancing its ability to conduct operations across multiple domains of warfare. Large-scale military exercises. Russia conducted numerous military exercises that served both as a cover for the buildup and as rehearsals for potential military operations. These exercises often simulated offensive operations, including rapid deployment of forces, combined arms maneuvers, and integration of air and naval power. By framing these activities as exercises, Russia maintained a veneer of plausible deniability while simultaneously heightening the state of readiness of its forces. Intimidation and strategic deception. The visible display of military power was intended to intimidate Ukraine and its allies, creating a climate of uncertainty and fear that could influence diplomatic negotiations and political decision-making. At the same time, the ambiguous nature of the troop movements and exercises served to obscure Russia's true intentions. This strategic ambiguity complicated the efforts of Ukraine and its allies to assess the situation accurately and respond effectively. Obscuring preparations for invasion. By intertwining genuine military exercises with preparations for invasion, Russia was able to mask the logistical and operational groundwork necessary for a large-scale military operation. This included the establishment of supply lines, the pre-positioning of ammunition and fuel depots, and the setup of command and control infrastructure. Such preparations are critical for sustaining military operations, and by concealing them within broader exercises, Russia enhanced its ability to launch sudden and decisive actions. The period leading up to the invasion highlighted the use of military posturing and maneuvers as a tool of statecraft and as a precursor to aggressive actions. The strategic deployment of forces along the Ukrainian border, the conduct of large-scale exercises, and the demonstration of advanced military capabilities were all elements of a broader strategy aimed at undermining Ukraine's security and sovereignty while attempting to manage international reactions. Understanding these maneuvers provides critical insights into modern military strategy and the ways in which states use the threat of force to achieve geopolitical objectives. Political and economic influence efforts. Russia's influence campaigns in Ukraine represent a multifaceted approach to hybrid warfare, combining traditional power politics with modern information operations to achieve strategic objectives. These campaigns were meticulously designed to exploit existing societal divisions, historical grievances, and economic vulnerabilities, thereby shaping Ukraine's internal dynamics to align with Russian geopolitical interests. Support for pro-Russian factions. Russia actively supported political parties and movements within Ukraine that were sympathetic to Russian interests or espoused a pro-Russian stance. This support ranged from financial backing to media coverage on Russian state-controlled outlets, providing these factions with a platform to disseminate their views and increase their influence within Ukrainian politics. By bolstering these groups, Russia aimed to create a more favorable political environment for its policies and to undermine pro-European and nationalist elements within Ukraine. Economic leverage. Russia's influence in Ukraine was also exerted through economic means, most notably in the energy sector. Ukraine's dependence on Russian natural gas was a significant point of leverage, which Russia used to exert political pressure by manipulating gas prices, cutting off supplies, or threatening to do so. These actions were intended to underscore Ukraine's economic vulnerabilities and to coerce Ukrainian leadership into making concessions aligned with Russian interests, such as delaying or derailing integration efforts with European institutions. Information operations and propaganda. A cornerstone of Russia's influence efforts was its sophisticated use of information operations, aimed at swaying public opinion and sowing discord within Ukrainian society. Russian state media and covert online operations spread disinformation, amplified divisive narratives, and propagated a portrayal of Ukraine as deeply divided between its eastern, Russian-speaking regions and its western, Ukrainian-speaking areas. These narratives often emphasized historical ties between Russia and Ukraine, glorified the Soviet past, and depicted the Ukrainian government as illegitimate, corrupt, and fascist, thereby undermining its authority and legitimacy. Destabilization of the socio-political landscape. The cumulative effect of these influence operations was a significant destabilization of Ukraine's socio-political landscape. By amplifying social divides, undermining trust in democratic institutions, and fostering a climate of uncertainty and fear, Russia created fertile ground for further interventions, such as the annexation of Crimea and the support of separatist movements in the Donbass region. The unrest in eastern Ukraine, particularly in the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts, was both a consequence and a continuation of these influence campaigns, with Russia providing military, financial, and logistical support to separatist forces. Facilitation of annexation and unrest. The annexation of Crimea and the subsequent unrest in eastern Ukraine were directly facilitated by the groundwork laid by Russian influence operations. The portrayal of the Russian intervention as a response to calls for protection from Russian-speaking populations in these regions was made more plausible by the preceding campaigns that emphasized ethnic, cultural, and political ties to Russia. This narrative was used to justify military actions and to garner support among Russian and pro-Russian populations, both within Ukraine and internationally. Legal and illegal immigration. Russia's strategy in Ukraine included the nuanced use of both legal and illegal immigration pathways to further its geopolitical aims, employing a blend of overt and covert operations to insert operatives and spread pro-Russian sentiment, particularly in regions with significant ethnic Russian populations such as eastern Ukraine and Crimea. Exploitation of legal immigration pathways. Russia utilized the existing legal frameworks for immigration and travel between Russia and Ukraine to facilitate the movement of individuals who could act in support of Russian interests. This included the use of business, tourist, and familial visitation visas, which allowed for the relatively unobtrusive entry of Russian nationals into Ukraine. Once inside the country, these individuals could engage in activities ranging from organizing pro-Russian rallies to establishing networks that could be activated to support Russian objectives at critical moments. Covert entry tactics. Beyond the use of legal pathways, Russia also resorted to more covert methods to infiltrate operatives into Ukraine. This included the use of forged documents, clandestine border crossings, and the manipulation of identity verification processes to insert individuals without drawing attention. These operatives were often tasked with more sensitive or direct roles in the influence campaigns, including intelligence gathering, coordination with local pro-Russian elements, and the execution of sabotage activities against Ukrainian state interests. Leveraging ethnic and cultural ties. A significant aspect of Russia's strategy was its leveraging of deep-rooted ethnic and cultural ties in regions like eastern Ukraine and Crimea, where large portions of the population identify ethnically or culturally as Russian. By appealing to shared history, language, and cultural affiliations, Russia aimed to cultivate a sense of allegiance or sympathy towards Russian state interests. This was often manifested in the promotion of Russian world, Ruski Mir, narratives which emphasize the unity and solidarity of Russian-speaking communities, irrespective of national borders. Promotion of pro-Russian sentiment. The operatives and sympathizers inserted into Ukraine were instrumental in promoting pro-Russian sentiment, often through grassroots organizing, the distribution of Russian propaganda materials, and the use of social media and other digital platforms to disseminate narratives favorable to Russian interests. This soft power approach was designed to create a conducive environment for Russia's more overt actions, such as the annexation of Crimea and the support of separatist movements in the Donbass region, by ensuring a base level of local support or at least reducing resistance to these initiatives. Infiltration and influence operations. The combined use of legal and illegal immigration tactics facilitated a comprehensive infiltration strategy, allowing Russia to establish a network of operatives and sympathizers across key regions in Ukraine. These individuals played a crucial role in the broader influence operations, contributing to the destabilization efforts and enhancing Russia's ability to manipulate political and social dynamics within Ukraine to its advantage. The strategic use of immigration pathways and covert entry tactics by Russia in Ukraine underscores the multifaceted nature of modern geopolitical strategies, where traditional and non-traditional methods are blended to achieve state objectives. By embedding operatives and promoting pro-Russian sentiments within strategic regions, Russia aimed to undermine Ukrainian sovereignty from within, laying the groundwork for further territorial and political maneuvers that aligned with its broader regional ambitions. Annexation of Crimea and unrest in eastern Ukraine. The annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014 and the subsequent unrest in eastern Ukraine, particularly in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, serve as stark illustrations of Russia's multifaceted approach to achieving its geopolitical objectives. This approach skillfully combined the use of conventional military forces, covert operatives, and the mobilization of local sympathizers to orchestrate events that would lead to significant territorial and political gains. Use of military personnel. The term "little green men" became synonymous with the initial phase of the Crimea annexation, referring to soldiers wearing unmarked green military uniforms who appeared in the region. These forces, later acknowledged by Russia to be its military personnel, were instrumental in seizing key government buildings, military installations, and infrastructure, effectively taking control of the peninsula with minimal initial resistance. The absence of identifying insignia and the initial denial of involvement by the Russian government were tactics aimed at creating ambiguity and complicating international response to the situation. Mobilization of local operatives. Concurrent with the deployment of military personnel, Russia capitalized on a network of local operatives in Crimea and eastern Ukraine. These individuals, often with pro-Russian leanings or affiliations to Russian intelligence, played a critical role in organizing local support for the annexation and subsequent separatist movements. They facilitated referendums, declared independent republics in Donetsk and Luhansk, and formed the administrative backbone of these self-proclaimed entities, all while maintaining a narrative of legitimate local self-determination. Non-military actors and civilian involvement. The unrest and separatist movements in eastern Ukraine saw significant involvement of non-military actors, including local militia groups, volunteers from Russia, and civilian sympathizers. These groups were often armed and trained by Russian forces or through covert supply channels, enhancing their capability to engage in armed conflict against Ukrainian government forces. Their involvement added a layer of complexity to the conflict, blurring the lines between civilian unrest and military engagement. Exploitation of the porous Ukraine-Russia border. The geographical and operational porosity of the border between Ukraine and Russia facilitated the movement of personnel, arms, and supplies that sustained the separatist movements in eastern Ukraine. This porous border allowed Russia to maintain a degree of plausible deniability regarding its direct involvement, even as it provided critical support to the separatists. Strategic leveraging of local sympathizers. Throughout the annexation of Crimea and the conflict in eastern Ukraine, Russia adeptly leveraged local sympathizers to advance its objectives. These sympathizers, driven by a variety of motivations, ranging from ethnic and cultural affiliations to political and economic grievances, provided a veneer of legitimacy to the actions of Russian forces and separatist movements. Their involvement was crucial in shaping the narrative of the conflict, both within the affected regions and in the broader international discourse. The annexation of Crimea and the unrest in eastern Ukraine underscore the Kremlin's adept use of a hybrid warfare strategy, combining conventional military power with asymmetric tactics and local political engagement to achieve strategic goals. This approach not only facilitated territorial expansion, but also significantly undermined Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, posing a challenge to international norms and the security architecture in Europe. Challenges in attribution. The challenge of attributing specific actions to state-sponsored operatives, particularly in the context of the conflict in Ukraine, stems from the inherently covert nature of these activities and the strategic use of proxies and plausible deniability by the Russian state. These factors create a complex environment where direct links to state sponsorship are often obscure, making it difficult to attribute actions definitively. Covert nature of operations. Many of the activities undertaken to destabilize Ukraine and advance Russian interests are inherently covert, designed to operate below the threshold of open conflict and international scrutiny. This includes cyber operations, the deployment of little green men without insignia, and the covert supply of arms and support to separatist groups. The clandestine nature of these operations means that evidence is often circumstantial or requires significant intelligence capabilities to uncover. Use of proxies. Russia has adeptly used proxy forces, including local separatist groups in eastern Ukraine, private military companies like the Wagner Group, and other non-state actors to execute military and political objectives in the region. These proxies act on behalf of Russian interests, but maintain a degree of separation that complicates attribution. The use of proxies allows Russia to advance its goals while maintaining a level of plausible deniability and reducing the risk of direct confrontation with the international community. Plausible deniability. A key component of Russia's strategy is maintaining plausible deniability about its involvement in destabilizing activities in Ukraine. By employing tactics such as unmarked military personnel, denying official involvement in cyberattacks, and using proxies, Russia creates ambiguity about its role. This ambiguity complicates diplomatic responses and international legal actions, as definitive proof of state sponsorship is challenging to establish. Consistent patterns of behavior. Despite the challenges in direct attribution, the consistent pattern of behavior and the convergence of reported incidents provide strong circumstantial evidence of Russian involvement. These patterns include the strategic objectives served by the actions, the similarity of tactics used in different operations, and the alignment of these activities with Russia's known geopolitical interests. Intelligence assessments, investigative journalism, and research by cybersecurity firms have contributed to a body of evidence that, taken together, points to a coordinated campaign by Russia. International response and forensic investigations. The international community, including state actors and independent organizations, has employed various forensic and investigative techniques to attribute actions to Russia. This includes cyber-forensic analysis, satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and on-the-ground investigations. While these efforts have provided compelling evidence of Russian involvement, the challenges of attribution still impact the formulation of legal and diplomatic responses. The attribution of specific destabilizing actions in Ukraine to Russian state-sponsored operatives is inherently challenging due to the covert nature of these operations, the use of proxies, and the strategic ambiguity maintained by Russia. However, the accumulation of evidence and the consistent pattern of behavior across multiple incidents provide a strong basis for attributing these actions to Russian efforts to destabilize Ukraine and assert its geopolitical interests in the region. Conclusion. The strategic maneuvers undertaken by Russia in the lead-up to its 2022 invasion of Ukraine unveil a sophisticated blueprint for undermining national sovereignty and expanding geopolitical influence. This report has dissected a myriad of tactics employed by the Kremlin, ranging from cyber incursions and military intimidation to covert influence campaigns and the manipulation of immigration channels. The annexation of Crimea and the fomentation of unrest in eastern Ukraine epitomize the culmination of these efforts, highlighting a deliberate strategy to destabilize Ukraine and secure Russian strategic objectives. For nations like the United States, grappling with complex border security challenges, the insights gleaned from Russia's actions in Ukraine are particularly salient. The exploitation of legal and illegal immigration pathways, as demonstrated in the Ukrainian context, serves as a poignant reminder of the vulnerabilities that can be leveraged by state and non-state actors to infiltrate, exert influence, and potentially compromise sovereignty. The U.S. must heed the lessons from Ukraine's experience, recognizing that open border issues present not just a policy challenge, but a potential vector for geopolitical maneuvering. In crafting countermeasures, it is imperative to adopt a holistic approach that encompasses not only the physical security of borders, but also the resilience of cyber infrastructure, the integrity of political institutions, and the cohesion of the social fabric. The U.S. and its allies must enhance collaborative intelligence sharing, invest in cyber defense capabilities, and foster public awareness and resilience against disinformation campaigns. Moreover, the international community must reaffirm its commitment to the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity, establishing a clear and unified stance against actions that seek to undermine these tenets. The situation in Ukraine underscores the necessity for vigilance, adaptability, and collective action in the face of evolving hybrid threats. In conclusion, the strategic playbook unveiled by Russia's activities in Ukraine offers critical insights for nations navigating the complex dynamics of modern geopolitics. As the U.S. addresses its border security challenges, the lessons from Ukraine highlight the need for comprehensive strategies that safeguard sovereignty against a spectrum of threats. Understanding and adapting to the multifaceted nature of these challenges is paramount for maintaining national security and ensuring regional and global stability in an increasingly interconnected and contested world.